watching Pathbreakers. I'm Neha Bothra. I'm here to interview India's first individual Olympic gold winner, Abhinav Bindra, the man who chased perfection, challenged deeply rooted beliefs and flipped perceptions to change the face of sport in India forever. I'm here to understand what it takes to fire that one shot which makes you a part of legends. Abhinav, thank you so much for joining us on Pathbreakers. It's so good to have you on our show. How have you been?
Thank you for having me. I've been well, busy.
I've been listening to some of your recent podcasts that you've been hosting. I heard the one with Rahul Dravid. What really triggered the podcast?
Well, my podcast series is called In the Zone. I actually never got into the zone as an athlete, so it was my way of discovering how athletes do it. But frankly, it was just something I was always interested to learn from other athletes and from great achievers. And I think athletes have wonderful stories, and they all have wonderful life lessons that can draw parallels to other people and other walks of life. So that is something it was my passion project, which I did. I did season 1. Some people enjoyed it, so now I'm under pressure to do season 2, but I haven't decided if that's going to happen.
Was it a bit nostalgic as well?
A little bit, but it was more about conversations with my guests, and I was playing what you're playing today, so it was all right. I appreciate your job a little bit more now. It's quite difficult, especially the preparation for it. It's not so easy.
Mm-hmm. So, I understand that each sport is different. The challenges vary from sport to sport. But when you were speaking with them in the course of the conversations, what were some commonalities in the journey that you perhaps felt were very similar to yours? The stories behind what we know of them as people. Were there any differences? Were there commonalities? What was your...
I think lots of commonalities, and I think sport has been their greatest teacher as well. Sport teaches one so much. Of course, it teaches you a thing or two about winning, but more importantly, sport teaches you how to lose. Sport teaches you how to set goals and go after them with honesty and integrity. Sport teaches you a lot about respect, about respecting rules, about respecting competitors, and also about learning to respect yourself. And those were the commonalities. But of course, approach was individual, and every individual, every human being is different and look at things and perceives things differently, which also teaches us that there's no singular way to achieve success, and there are 1,000 ways to roam. And similarly, each one carved their own journey and their own path.
22 years, 5 Olympic cycles. How do you look back at your journey?
Well, that's an interesting question, because now that I've exited my investment of sorts, and I look back at my 20 odd years in sport far more dispassionately. I don't look back at this room or these few medals that hang on these walls, but I really look back at my many years in sport, at the relationships that I was able to build, starting with my mum and my dad, for example, the relationships that I was able to build with my coaches and my support staff, many of them who became extended family. Those are incredible relationships which will stay true to with me in whatever I do. Some of those relationships were difficult relationships as well. There was one particular coach in my career who I necessarily didn't get along with, but found a way to work with. And we continue to be very good friends. He, of course, doesn't give me any sports advice anymore, but he's now my stock market advisor.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So tell me something, is it at some point emotionally exhausting to relive those episodes of stress, anxiety, the process that you had to go through, the struggle? Or would you say it is something that motivates you when you are low, when you are down, when you've had a bad day? So how do you connect with that struggle now? How do you draw upon it as inspiration? Or is it something that you don't want to think about?
I look back at them at memories, and very fond memories. The journey was unbelievable. It taught me so much. It made me who I am. But I'm a firm believer, and that's what sport taught me. Sport taught me was to really live in the present moment. And while the past was great, it is my past. And I don't really look at it too seriously. That's gone. It was wonderful years in sport, but my life has moved on from being an active athlete. It imbibed certain values in me, which will stay true in whatever I do. But I don't dwell on the past. Sometimes to move on in life, you have to burn your past, and that's my approach towards my present. That I don't really think back of the past. That's gone.
Mm-hmm. There's a very popular saying. It goes something like, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. You've done exactly that in your career. I think each setback you had, you just made a massive comeback. So how did you do it? How do you dig deeper and get that 1% more, that 1% more of strength, 1% more of faith? How do you do that when things aren't in your favor?
Well, I think success in sport, and I think success in life, I think in general, is learning how to fail well. I think at least in sport, you will encounter much more failure than success. And in order to make a success out of it once in a while, you have to use those failures well, and you have to learn how to take those experiences in a positive manner. You have to learn to let go of the unwanted baggage that failure brings, and you have to learn from those experiences and not get overwhelmed by them or carried away by those difficult moments. Yes, it will be difficult. Nobody likes to fail. There is disappointment, and we're all human beings, and it's all right to whine about it and be grumpy about it for a couple of days. But I think after that, you have to reflect back on those experiences, see what you could do better, and try and be better than what you were yesterday. And that is precisely what I did. Learned how to fail well. Sometimes succeeded, most times failed. About digging deep, that is quite different, because I was somebody who always struggled to have faith.
You speak a lot about self-doubt, bouts of self-doubt. So how do you come out of that?
I frankly never came out of it. I just learned to coexist with it. If I was in a lonely sport and a lonely sort of a pursuit, but my constant companion in my career was self-doubt. Why did I have so much self-doubt? Because all my eggs were in one basket. It was all in or nothing, and there was a lack of balance. I was obsessive, extremely obsessive, perfectionist in nature. And while that helped me in many ways to get better, no question about it, but it was also a drawback in many ways. Worked with trainers, worked with psychologists, this, that, and the other. But I could really never achieve it, at least in my sports career. So I learned to approach it a little bit differently. And there was one breakthrough moment happened when, instead of chasing self-belief, I started chasing self-respect. And that self-respect was really born from the fact that I would leave absolutely no stone unturned in preparation. So that was my process. That was my way of getting better as an athlete, of dealing with doubt, which stayed with me constantly.
Mm-hmm. Chasing perfection, as you said, that was something you concentrated a lot on during your sporting career. It's a lot like feeding a hungry elephant, right? There's no end to it. So how did you make peace with yourself? Yes, you put in 100%, but then if you always at the back of your mind feel that this is not perfect, I could have done more, how do you make peace with yourself?
Yeah, there wasn't much peace. There was a lot of conflict. But yeah, it also drove me. I would go to bed and suddenly wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning with an idea, and I would be in my shooting range at 4:15 to try and execute that idea. So it was a little bit crazy, and perfection is like chasing an untamable beast. You can never find that perfection, and the factors which come into play when there is pressure and when everything is not in your control, you have to find a way to perform there. And there it comes down to many aspects. It also comes down to mindset there. And by mindset I mean is the ability to adapt, to be flexible in decision making and having the nimbleness to make quick decisions. And that becomes critical to perform under pressure. So it's a very fine line, but I think chasing perfection is all right, but I think you also, I realized at one point of time in my career that while I can chase perfection in training, when I go into competition, I would just be, it would be a desperate attempt to hold on to or gather whatever skill I had to just perform decently. But the idea was to get so good in training that the quality of execution was so good in training that even if I did fall down or under pressure, my level of performance did fall, it was still good enough to be in the top whatever in the world.
Mm-hmm. You know, many leaders go through this phase where they reach a point where they've fulfilled a lot of their desires, they've met their goals, but there's a void. You know, there's a feeling of, or rather a search for meaning, a search for fulfillment of a different kind, and people fill that void in different ways. Some take to substance abuse, some to other things. What was your coping mechanism?
My greatest void came 2 days after I won a gold medal at the Olympic Games, and I achieved my life's biggest goal that I had set. Good, beautiful looking gold medal was in my pocket. I was all dressed with really nowhere to go. And frankly, post Beijing, I was in half a mind to quit sport at that time and move on to some other calling. Of course, I didn't know what the other calling was, but I was very confused and certainly had a lack of motivation and exactly this void what you talked about. I went on a Vipassana meditation course, trying with the goal of trying to find my new calling. I go on to this silent retreat where I had to meditate 10 hours a day and for 10 days, and frankly all I did in these 10 days was think back to shooting and know how I could get better. And that taught me something. That taught me that I loved what I did. I loved the process of my sport. And that realization in itself was very empowering, because to move ahead after a success like that, you can't jump onto the next peak. You have to climb that mountain down, your mountain, that peak that you're sitting on, climb it down, and you have to climb the next peak one step at a time. And that requires commitment to the process. That requires full commitment towards the boring and mundane, because there is a lot of boring and mundane in achieving big successes.
Mm-hmm. So for 22 years, your life meticulously revolved around your sport, getting that perfect shot. Mm-hmm. So over the past 5-6 years, how have you rebuilt your life?
Well, exactly how I started my sports career. You start at the base, one step at a time. You find joy in effort. You be patient. You build it one brick after one step after the other. You try and put focus on the process, and that's exactly the values that my sports career taught me. And there was also a lot of adaptation that was needed for me to in my career transition. When I was an athlete, it was all about me. Success or failure was really dependent on my performance. But now in work or in life or in business or whatever I do, it's not just dependent on me.
It's a whole team.
It's a whole team. And so you're no longer the central character of the story. And I think that is a mental switch that has to be made. But throughout my career, I learned how to adapt, and it was just something that I had to make a peace with, which I did very early on, and it was absolutely fine. It's a new journey. It's a new struggle, and it's enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. What would you tell your 13-year-old self?
I would tell my 13-year-old self to, acknowledge myself, acknowledge my own performances, the smaller goals that I did achieve along the way and the smaller victories that I did have. Acknowledge them, because frankly I didn't acknowledge them enough, and of course have that balance, continue to have that balance throughout your career was something I would definitely promote to my, if I had that option. Mm-hmm. My greatest moments in my sports career actually came when I was a student athlete. That is when I had balance. I had only so many hours to train, and I had to study. And I performed the best at that time. Okay, I didn't win a gold medal at the Olympics, but general performance was, I never achieved that level in my 22 years.
So if you could go back in time and rewrite some chapters of your life, what would you want to change?
I don't know if what I would like to change, but I think this little element.
You would want more balance.
I would like to have more balance, and that takes courage. That takes courage to let go, especially when you have that sort of a personality. When you are a little obsessive like me, you have that perfectionist streak. It's tough to let go and tough to do other things, because you believe in the fact that training 14 hours instead of 13 hours will do you good. But sometimes just stepping back does you even more good. I achieved many goals in my sports career. Yes. I won in Olympic Games, I won a World Championship gold medal, I won Asian Games medals, I won 9 medals at the Commonwealth Games and several others. But if you ask me the question, did I achieve my potential? The answer is no. I fell very short of achieving my fullest potential. And now that I have the luxury of hindsight and having the ability to look back, I would attribute that failure to the lack of balance that I had as an athlete. So I think that is the only thing I would like to change. But frankly, we don't have that option, so why dwell on it?
Is life how you wanted it to be?
I mean, who can tell you what life should pan out to be? I mean, I don't look at life that way. I look at life day to day. I mean, and be grateful for what I have rather than dwell on what I don't. And I think it is about acknowledging how grateful we should be as human beings and really try and find joy in the little things of life. I think that is how I try and live it. Of course, get frustrated sometimes on that and don't follow through completely on that, but that is my attempt. Never actually had that thought process to really get into that reflection.
So what are some things you want to do in the coming decade? Maybe invest in stock markets, invest in startups, act in a movie, write a book. I'm giving you ideas, but what do you want to do?
Oh, it's wonderful that you're giving me ideas. That's very, I'm happy about that. Stock market, I dwell in it a little bit. 50% of my time is devoted to my business, which is transitional healthcare. I set up these cutting edge centers which work on neurological rehab and orthopedic rehab and cardiac rehab. And of course, a lot about sports medicine and sports rehab, but also a lot on prevention and working on performance enhancement for athletes and non-athletes as well. That is an area where I see growth in the future, because I think the business model of healthcare is really in India is critical care. Transitional care is not taken seriously enough as yet. That is an area of focus. 50% of my time is devoted to my foundation. That is my primary outreach to sport in India is through my foundation, and there we work on 3 areas, 3 pillars. The first pillar is intervention. We have 3 projects currently running under intervention. The second pillar is education. It is not just about empowering the athlete, it is about creating an ecosystem which is world class. So we've set a sports medicine and research institute, which is giving out degrees in sports science and physiotherapy to start with. We have a faculty from across the world which deliver these lectures. The third, and probably for me the most important pillar, is using the power of sport for social good. Our current project is bringing in the Olympic value education program into India. So our current program is underway in 100 schools. 35,000 kids going through this program, and of course we're going to scale up every year.
Mm-hmm. Is it heartening for you to see the way sport has progressed over the past couple of decades, from a time where infrastructure was a constant complaint? Do you see improvements, incremental improvements over the years?
Of course, I mean there is a lot of improvement. I think there is a clear prioritization of sport through the government. I think there's a lot of initiatives that they've put into play are extremely positive. You can even rank it amongst the top nations who support elite athletes when it comes to preparation. So there is a lot of positive that is happening. Of course, we're a big country and there is so much more scope to do more. But I guess one has to be patient. But I think we're on the right track. I think the next decade or so will be a decade for sport in this country, and I think sport can really play a very important role in how our society evolves and how our society develops, apart from just sporting success on the field of play. That will, which I believe will anyways get better, but sport has a much bigger role to play in nation building.
Indeed it does. Abhinav, thank you so much for joining us on Pathbreakers and sharing your inspiring journey with us.
Thank you.